terms of the topics, this is the agenda, and not everything in here may be new to you, so everything that I explained, you may have already been doing, but I'm hoping you'll walk away with some new ideas and takes on how to approach your live operations in-game. So James first talked about the first 5 minutes, so how to capture your audience within the first 5 minutes. So this presentation will try and attempt to explain how to keep your audiences engaged for a long term through live operations. So we begin with this session with what is live operations. So let's quickly go over what liveOps isn't and what it is. So firstly, live operations is not downloadable content they're releasing every quarter. This is a pretty standard thing that most developers do anyway, and irregardless, and doesn't truly optimize or manage player life cycles. Any event outside of the game is also usually not considered as live operations. It's also not you going into completely changing your mobile game, so changing the back end, changing your code, changing all of your UI, to create a 100% different experience. That is also not considered live ops. So what do we consider live operations to be? So ultimately, it's a toolkit that you create and have available to you. It allows you to augment or change the player's experience and throughout the game. It helps you stimulate your players, monetization by driving additional demand for purchases, and helps you keep a fresh and engaging experience to limit and reduce player churn. And all three of these will help you reach your goals and hopefully increase the longevity of your game. So there are three types of elements in live operations content. So content, supply-side sales, and demand-side events. There's clear relationships across content, supply, and demand-side events in your game. Sales can be for new character releases or limited time durable goods. Demand side requires content to be available in order to increase your user engagement. Each of which will depend on your goals and who you're targeting with your live operations toolkit. So let's start with content. Content keeps players engaged with your game, which will hopefully drive your revenue performance. So let's see how fresh content is linked to revenue by looking at some trends in terms of common trends we see relating to content releases in mobile games. So this graph is an example of a mobile game that is doing very limited content updates. We can see that it creates irregular shark fin shape in the daily revenue trends. But we can also see that irregularity of content updates causes revenue degradation with each new release. This is because engaged players will play through the content and then have nothing to do later on, leading to boredom and high rates of churn. This means that with each content update, you're reaching fewer and fewer players, leading to a declining trend. Even really basic live ops can give end content players something to engage with, so like daily quests, daily missions, anything to keep them engaged is good to reduce churn. So, regularly releasing content, but also utilizing liveOps will help limit player boredom. liveOps engages players by distributing content more frequently, providing them multiple options of what they can engage with throughout the period. A key to liveOps is strategically distributing regular content updates in between large APK updates. To create this cadence that will drive more consistent revenue trends, and if done optimally and correctly, you can even show a growing revenue over time. Now, why is content important? Content drives engagement with the core action in your core game loop. Now, as a refresher, the core game loop is a set of actions that a player will be repeatedly doing over and over again in your game. On top of that, the core game loop you have designed along with the in-game economy via in-app purchases will help you identify how you can continue to leverage content to drive sustained growth through liveOps. With that in mind, let's go over some of the elements that have an effect on in-game economy. So if you have an in-game economy, there are commonly two types of goods, durable and consumable goods. Durable goods are what I'm defining as one-time purchases that usually provide long-term value. So things including like characters, weapons, cars if it's a racing game, or buildings if it's like an SLG. These usually are only purchased once, and it can last a long, extended period of time. Consumable goods, on the other hand, are the goods that a player purchases and then consumes throughout gameplay. So some of the examples are in terms of consumable goods include energy, which constrain play frequency or duration. Resources, which are used to upgrade, unlock buildings, units, etc. And in-game currency, which allows access and acquire content and gameplay. So here are some examples relating to content controls with the core game loop. Specifically thinking about the actions of content as well as the outcomes that you ultimately have control over. To go over one example, match 3. Everyone's probably familiar with match 3. It has a puzzle-solving element as the core gameplay route, which players will do over and over again, and the level of difficulty as the game progresses. So the more you play, the harder the puzzles get. What are the actions content that you have available in your games? And how do you test, optimize the outcomes or game design to change player engagement behaviors? These are the kind of questions that you should be asking to further improve your liveOps within your games. As mentioned previously, content ultimately is going to drive both your supply-side sales and your demand-side events in your liveOps strategy. So now, let's spend some time deep diving into supply-side sales. So what are we defining as supply-side sales? Well, supply-side sales commonly introduce discounted assets into the game economy. They allow your players access to your in-game assets at a cheaper price. And ultimately, because of the discounted price, you see a high conversion rate when you have an in-game sale or offer driving your overall revenue performance. The most common approach, once you've learned more about what your players' needs and values are in your game, is to segment your players in order to target the right audience at the right time. The best and most common example of that majority of IAP-driven monetization games utilize are starter packs. That being said, supply-side sales can be approached in different ways. IP discounts and currency sales are by far the most popular approach in mobile games at the moment. You can take the offerings you have available in your mobile game and simply apply a discount or sale to it. So but there are some pros and cons to this, and I'll just go over quickly, what are the pros. Firstly, discounts naturally drive large spikes in revenue. However, the negative side of that is that with sales, you're pushing a large amount of discounted assets into your in-game economy, which can negatively impact your revenue long term. Just because you're introducing more assets that people have to spend, so the next time you do a normal sale, players might not be inclined to spend as much as previously during your sales. The second option is bundling. And let's be real, we'll do it because it's very commonplace. As mentioned before, a popular example that majority of IP mobile games use are starter packs. But what are the pros and cons of this approach? Bundling usually drives up the value of the offer, even more so than just simply IP discount sales. However, depending on your genre of game or type of core gameplay you have, it can be viewed as pay to win or pay to progress. Which can drive down user retention and engagement from your non-buying community. So you have to be careful about balancing how you bundle your items for a sale. Now we've covered two of the three elements here. So firstly, again, I'm going to repeat myself here, but we know content is going to power both your supply-side sales and your demand-side events in your liveOps strategy. And now we've covered a high level in terms of supply-side sales, which are the inflow of discounted assets into the game economy, or provide those paid sources inflows of your in-game assets, which can be coupled with the content you have in your game. So now let's spend some time deep diving into demand-side events to complete this whole picture. So what are we defining as demand-side events? Well, Demand-side events commonly increase player engagement in the mobile game by creating an expanded or altered experience for your players. And because of expanded or altered experience, you usually see a higher engagement rate with your core game loop from players, which ultimately drives stronger monetization performance. Now, we can commonly see two approaches of how to integrate these types of events into mobile games. The first approach is structuring them on your existing core game loops. And this can be done by either changing their existing behavior with your core game loop for a limited time, or drive adoption of an underutilized game loop or feature in your game that players don't regularly engage with. The second approach structured events around dynamic side content. So here, driving players to engage with a limited time content or game mode. This type of demand-side event would usually be parallel to your existing core game loops. Now, these are different types of events or features that we are seeing rising in popularity across multiple genres. But the important I want to call out here is that they should satisfy your players' motivations, how they help you and your team reach specific goals and KPIs, and that there are different considerations to take. I want to point out that while you can create segmented events, you can also utilize segmentation and player behavior understanding with your global demand side events to create a custom experience across everyone that has access. So, how do you actually do this? So this is no simple answer here, and it will all depend on how your core gameplay works, what genre you are, how frequent you're doing the live operations, but everything in common across all genres and all games is that you have to get creative. Think outside the box. Ask the right questions. What do my audience want? What do we need to achieve the goal? So there is no right or wrong answer here, and I encourage everyone to experiment and make mistakes, learn from them, and keep moving forward by improving your live operations. Yeah. So now that we've covered all three of the liveOps elements, we know content is going to power both your supply-side sales, your demand-side events, and your liveOps strategy. We covered high level that supply-side sales are the inflow of discounted assets into the game economy, or commonly provide those paid sources inflows of your in-game assets, which can be coupled with content that you have in your game. And finally, we've covered demand-side events that are targeted to increase player engagement with the game to drive the outflows or sinks for in-game assets. So, to close my presentation, let's cover how you can utilize these three to create an optimized cadence to drive variations in the core game. The goal of these three elements of liveOps is to create an engaging cadence that feels fresh and unpredictable to your players. So let's look at some examples. Here, you're looking at two examples of daily revenue trends for 120 days. Starting with the chart on the left, it is an example of a game that does engagement-focused liveOps on a weekly cadence, plus some major sales roughly once per month. What you see here are clear day-of-week variations with a peak revenue occurring at the start of the weekly event and the lowest revenue day occurring at the event end. In contrast, let's look at the right chart, which shows a game with a very regular sales and event cadence. One where liveOps are being run on most of the days of the week. With apps like this, the revenue volatility between the highest and lowest performing days is a lot smaller, with no major outliers such as what you see with the rare major sale. These are the two different content cadence strategies that you can make or decide to do, and to stimulate spend and engagement, and both can be seen as a positive. So they're both right. It's all about what is right for your audience and what works for you. So most commonly, liveOps cadences are planned and defined on a calendar month basis. So everyone, if you have January, February, you'll plan each liveOps. You might include various seasons to consider. If you're in the US, you might think of Thanksgiving, Christmas, Black Friday. There will be like pockets of monthly cadences where you can identify key opportunities, and then you can schedule your liveOps based on that. What is important here is that you plan meticulously with your team to identify what is best to continue to grow the performance for the planned month with clear goals in mind. Now, going back to some of the topics we've covered previously, you want to limit just how predictable you can be with your cadences. This can limit habituation, asset hoarding, ensure your players aren't bored with the same monotonous, events over and over again. So, for example, if you're just having one sale on a Saturday every week, players are going to be able to predict that. So what would happen is that you'll have players spending on Saturday, but then they won't spend any money or engage with the game for the rest of the week until that Saturday starts again, where they'll come back, asset hoard, and then churn again and come back and so on. Now, while this is common up front, it's very important for you and your team to identify where your opportunities are. These are just some questions that you can discuss as a team to help prioritize what your goals are, the audiences you're targeting of the KPI, and who are you targeting, and what kind of KPIs you want to improve. And here are some strategies to think about how to make your liveOps predictably unpredictable. Demand-side events, changing the day of the week, length of time, changing themes, can all be ways of keeping it fresh and new to your players. Running short-time daily deals can give breathers for the global supply-side sales. Leveraging bundles and changing what is offered also helps. The important thing is to try to be predictably unpredictable with these strategies. For my closing comments, my message towards everyone is this. There is no clear-cut answer to live operations. Again, it all depends on your game, what genre you're working with, what kind of game economy you have, what kind of audience you have, etc., etc. Just because you start implementing liveOps tomorrow, it does not mean it's instant success. I encourage everyone to experiment, make mistakes, learn from them, improve, and then execute the next month, next week, whatever the cadence is for your live operations is. It's all about consistently evolving and adapting. So, to sum up, here are the key takeaways from today's presentation. We have learned that liveOps has three elements: content, supply-side sales, demand-side events. They all have close relationships to each other. One will not work without the other. They all work in harmony together. And finally, and this is my most important message to everyone here, is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Experiment, learn from them, improve. There's no way, there is rarely you'll get it correct in 100% the next day. So again, experiment, talk to your audiences, talk with your team, exchange ideas, no matter how bad they are. It's always about experimenting and evolving from your mistakes. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope everyone has a great afternoon as well, and enjoy the rest of the content that's coming up. Thank you, everyone.